Hello, and welcome to another teaching from 119 Ministries. Our ministry believes that the whole Bible is true and applicable to our lives today. If you'd like to learn more about what we believe and teach, please visit us at testeverything.net. If you enjoyed this video, please click the like button and subscribe to our channel by clicking the subscribe button below. We hope you enjoy studying and testing the following teaching. The Israelites are the people most prominently featured in the Scriptures, but other peoples are mentioned as well. In this series, we examine what the Scriptures and history tell us about these other peoples. Who were they? Where did they live? What was their culture like? And what did God have to say about them? In this teaching, we will focus on one particular people, the Babylonians. Who were the Babylonians? The ancestry of the first Babylonians is uncertain, but they may have come from Noah's grandson, Cush. The first time the city of Babylon is mentioned, it is part of the kingdom of Nimrod, who was a Cushite. Babylon was a city located on the Euphrates River. It was in the same location as the modern city of Hilla in south-central Iraq. Babylon in Hebrew is pronounced Bavel, and is sometimes translated Babel. Bavel comes from a root word that means to mix or confuse, and the city was given this name because that was where God confused the languages of the world. Speaking of languages, the Babylonians' native language was Akkadian, but they also adopted Aramaic as their language for trade and international communications. Akkadian was written using wedge-shaped symbols called cuneiform, and was designed to be written on clay tablets. Aramaic, on the other hand, used the same alphabet as the Hebrew and Phoenician languages, and its letters were more suitable for writing with ink. Babylon ruled at least two major empires over its history. One is known as the Old Babylonian Empire, which was headed up by the king Hammurabi from 1792 BC to 1750 BC. The second, and even greater empire, is called the Neo-Babylonian Empire. This one began under the king Nabopolassar around 625 BC and lasted until 539 BC, when it was overthrown by King Cyrus of Persia. Throughout its history, even during the times when it did not rule the world, Babylon maintained a persistent influence upon the religion and culture of Mesopotamia. What were the Babylonians known for? The Babylonians were renowned for their advanced understanding of mathematics and astronomy. Babylonian students learned things that we're familiar with in mathematics today, such as determining the hypotenuse of a right triangle and solving quadratic equations. They also kept meticulous records of the motion of the stars and planets and developed sophisticated systems of predicting their movements. Another thing the Babylonians were renowned for was their impressive architecture, especially during the time of King Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar built and remodeled many temples and roads. He also expanded, reinforced, and beautified Babylon's gates, including the famous 50-foot-tall Ishtar Gate. This gate, made of blue bricks and decorated with images of fantastic animals, greeted everyone who entered Babylon by the King's Road. He is also credited with building Babylon's Hanging Gardens, which were considered one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. He also built a golden image outside the city that was 90 feet tall. Anyone entering Babylon during Nebuchadnezzar's reign would have been awestruck by the grand architecture that pervaded the city. How did the Babylonians worship? The Babylonians built temples which housed graven images of their gods. They worshipped dozens of gods, but 2 of their most prominent ones were Marduk, the god of the city of Babylon and ruler over the rest of the gods, and Ishtar, goddess of war and sex. The gods in Mesopotamia were often worshipped on top of mountains or high places. However, in places like Babylon, which were mostly flat, they would build their own mountains out of bricks. These brick mountains were called ziggurats, and they functioned as temples where idols were worshipped. The famous Tower of Babel was likely one of these ziggurats. The Babylonians practiced fortune-telling and magic. They believed that their gods could reveal the future if people performed the right rituals and made the right observations. These rituals and observations were called divination. One popular method of divination was to ask the gods a question and then examine the liver or intestines of a sacrificed animal. When certain shapes or colors were seen in these organs, they would be interpreted as answers to the question. Divination was also practiced by looking at the patterns of oil dripped into cups of water, watching the paths that birds took in flight, noting the date and nature of birth defects in people and animals, and observing the motion and color of the stars and planets. These signs were taken very seriously. Many Babylonians would hold off on important projects if they observed bad omens in the stars or other signs of bad luck. On the other hand, if they observed a good omen, then they would hurry up and get their important projects going while the gods' luck was on their side. In addition to using divination to predict the future, the Babylonians also used magic to try to influence the gods to do what they wanted. Sorcerers would mix up magical substances and use them in rituals to provide healing, protection, and removal of curses. Necromancers would try to make contact with the dead to receive insight and omens from them. People wore amulets and small figurines as charms to bring good fortune and ward off demons. And, of course, offerings were brought to the temples to try to directly win the favor of whichever god was housed in that temple. How did the Babylonians affect God's people? Babylon exerted a strong cultural influence on the entire Middle East, including Israel, for many centuries. God's people took on a number of Babylonian customs, including practicing divination and giving offerings to the Queen of Heaven, which was another title for the goddess Ishtar. God's wrath came upon Israel because of these idolatrous customs. While Babylon's cultural influence upon Israel was significant, the most direct way that Babylon affected God's people was when they militarily conquered Judah. In 605 BC, Babylon sacked Jerusalem, and they took many of the Judean aristocracy captive, including Daniel. Years later, the Judean king Zedekiah tried to break free from Babylon's control by allying with Egypt, but this effort completely backfired. In 586 BC, the Babylonians captured Zedekiah and exiled even more Judeans, and they destroyed the temple in Jerusalem. The Jews would remain Babylonian captives until 539 BC, when King Cyrus of Persia conquered Babylon and allowed them to return to Judea. At first, the Babylonians treated the captive Jews relatively well, but later the Jews faced severe persecution because of their religion. This may be why the symbolic woman who is drunk with the blood of the saints in the book of Revelation is called Babylon the Great. In the scriptures, Babylon serves as a symbol of sacrilege and persecution, of a nation that exalts itself over God and over his people. What did God say about the Babylonians? Yahweh condemned the Babylonians' religious practices. Of course, directly worshiping idols was off limits, but divination and magic were also prohibited. Leviticus 19, verse 26. You shall not eat any flesh with the blood in it. You shall not interpret omens or tell fortunes. Deuteronomy 18, verses 10 through 11. There shall not be found among you anyone who burns his son or his daughter as an offering, anyone who practices divination or tells fortunes or interprets omens, or a sorcerer or a charmer, or a medium or a necromancer, or one who inquires of the dead. The Babylonians also featured heavily in biblical prophecies. Isaiah and Jeremiah both foretold that Babylon would conquer the kingdom of Judah. Here's what Isaiah said to King Hezekiah about 100 years before these events occurred. 2 Kings 20, verse 17. Behold, the days are coming when all that is in your house, and that which your fathers have stored up till this day, shall be carried to Babylon. Nothing shall be left, says Yahweh. and some of your own sons who will come from you, whom you will father, shall be taken away, and they shall be eunuchs in the palace of the king of Babylon. Likewise, God foretold through Jeremiah that Zedekiah's later rebellion would not succeed. Jeremiah 21, verses 3 through 7. Then Jeremiah said to them, Thus you shall say to Zedekiah, Thus says Yahweh, the God of Israel, Behold, I will turn back the weapons of war that are in your hands, and with which you are fighting against the king of Babylon, and against the Chaldeans who are besieging you outside the walls. And I will bring them together into the midst of this city. I myself will fight against you with outstretched hand and strong arm, in anger and in fury and in great wrath. And I will strike down the inhabitants of this city, both man and beast. They shall die of a great pestilence. Afterwards, declares Yahweh, I will give Zedekiah, king of Judah, and his servants, and the people in this city who survived the pestilence, sword, and famine, into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, and into the hand of their enemies, into the hand of those who seek their lives. He shall strike them down with the edge of the sword. He shall not pity them, or spare them, or have compassion. God also foretold through Jeremiah that Judah would be exiled in Babylon for 70 years. Jeremiah 25, verse 11. This whole land shall become a ruin and a waste, and these nations shall serve the king of Babylon 70 years. Finally, God foretold that Babylon would be overthrown by the Medes and Persians. Here's what Daniel said the very night that it happened, in the famous incident of the writing on the wall. Daniel 5, verses 26 through 28. This is the interpretation of the matter. Mene, God has numbered the days of your kingdom and brought it to an end. Tekel, you have been weighed in the balances and found wanting. Peres, your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians. For more on this event, we recommend our teaching, The Exiled Prophet, Part 6, Writing on the Wall. Isaiah and Jeremiah also prophesied Babylon's fall well in advance of it actually happening. God said that Babylon's destruction was vengeance on behalf of his temple, which the Babylonians destroyed. Jeremiah 51, verse 11. Sharpen the arrows, take up the shields. Yahweh has stirred up the spirit of the kings of the Medes, because his purpose concerning Babylon is to destroy it. For that is the vengeance of Yahweh, the vengeance for his temple. After being destroyed by the Persians, Babylon never rose as an independent nation again. However, this was not the end of Babylon's mention in prophecy. The name Babylon resurfaces again in the book of Revelation, where it is called Babylon the Great. Many scholars agree that this is not referring to the literal city of Babylon, but it is referring to another city, possibly Rome or Jerusalem, and it's equating that city to the Babylon of prophecy because of its idolatry, pride, and persecution of God's people. Who were some significant Babylonians in the Bible? By far the most significant Babylonian mentioned in the Bible is King Nebuchadnezzar. As we mentioned earlier, Nebuchadnezzar was the king who conquered Judah, exiled the Jewish people, and destroyed the temple. He also built up and glorified the city of Babylon to its most impressive state ever. Under Nebuchadnezzar's reign, the Babylonian Empire dominated the Middle East, possessing all of the land conquered by the former Assyrian Empire, but also expanding westward into the city of Tyre and southward into Egypt. God sent Nebuchadnezzar a dream in which the king was a huge tree whose top reached to heaven, and it was visible to the end of the whole earth. And this was indeed a fitting characterization of him. For a time, he was, for all intents and purposes, the king of the world. How did the Babylonians influence history? The Babylonians had a strong influence on law, custom, and worship throughout Mesopotamia. For example, during the Old Babylonian Empire, King Hammurabi wrote a law code that standardized the laws throughout the land. Hammurabi's laws prohibited theft, perjury, kidnapping, neglectful property damage, dishonest money changing, adultery, certain kinds of incest, dishonoring one's parents, violent assault, medical malpractice, and many other crimes that we would recognize today. They also established a minimum wage for various occupations within the empire. The stated purpose of Hammurabi's law was to bring about the rule of righteousness in the land, to destroy the wicked and the evildoers so that the strong should not harm the weak. The Babylonians succeeded to a degree in accomplishing these ends, providing law and order along with some level of economic prosperity to many of their subjects. The impact of the Babylonians on modern culture also cannot be underestimated. Some of their concepts and practices have persisted throughout history, even to this day. Modern practices such as astrology, wearing lucky charms, and consulting psychics all have roots going back at least as far as ancient Babylon. The nation of Babylon is long gone, but their ways of consulting the gods still persist. What can we learn from the Babylonians? Of all the ancient religious and political systems that were built in opposition to God, Babylon's was arguably the most successful. Their gods became household names throughout the world for generations. Their superstitions took root in the hearts of both commoners and kings. Their laws provided the basis of justice for many peoples, and their prosperity helped to fill the bellies and the coffers of millions. Just as Nimrod, one of the early kings of Babylon, was a mighty hunter before Yahweh, the nation of Babylon itself stood in proud opposition to Yahweh for its entire existence, and no doubt they saw their prosperity and prestige as justifications for their pride. We must be doing things right, they likely thought. Look how successful we've been. Indeed, we see this sentiment expressed by Babylon's most successful king, Nebuchadnezzar. Daniel 4, verse 30. Is not this great Babylon which I have built by my mighty power as a royal residence, and for the glory of my majesty? Babylon, under Nebuchadnezzar, had tremendous glory, which was surely seen as a testament to the king's power and majesty. It was only reasonable to think that the king was doing things the right way. But God showed the serious flaw in that thinking. As it turns out, Babylon only succeeded because God allowed it, and he demonstrated that when he reduced Nebuchadnezzar to madness for 7 years and then later restored him to his right mind. God showed that Babylon's success was only by his permission, not by the king's power. This was not the first time that God taught this lesson to Babylon either. At the time of the Tower of Babel, a similar thing occurred. Genesis 11, verse 4. Then they said, Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be dispersed over the face of the whole earth. The idolatrous Babylonians thought they could build a tower to heaven to make a name for themselves. In other words, they thought they could impose their system of worship upon the world in defiance of the one true God. So, God confused their language so they couldn't understand each other. God wanted them to know that He was the source of their sound mind and coherent speech. He wanted them to know that they were not the source of their own success and glory. Today, we see the same Babylonian mentality at work in the world's most wealthy and glorious nations. The leaders of many countries seem to think that their power and success authorizes them to establish their own systems of worship, law, and lifestyle that are contrary to God. For example, according to God, the blood of an innocent man must not be shed, because God made man in His own image. However, in many Western nations, innocent blood can be shed as long as it is the mother's choice. The leaders of these nations do not respect the image of God because, like Nebuchadnezzar, they think that they prosper by their own power and therefore they do not need God. Another example we see in powerful nations is the neglect of the Sabbath. God established the Sabbath day as a day of rest as part of the creation of the world, but many wealthy nations do not rest on the Sabbath day. They think that their prosperity comes entirely from their own labor, not from God's provision, and so they disregard God's command to rest and acknowledge the work that He has done. Again, this is all part of a mentality that was exemplified in Babylon. Like Babylon, these modern countries have been very successful in spite of their rejection of God's ways. So how could they be wrong? After all, they've prospered greatly even though they've been rejecting God's commands. We might conclude, God forbid, that God's power really is limited, and that it's fine for us to be wicked as long as we can also prosper. We might think that we don't need God and we can instead rely upon ourselves for our own provision and our own morality. We might think that we are ultimately in charge of the world and that we shape our own destiny. However, through the story of Babylon, God shows us that He is in charge of everything. When the wicked prosper, it's not because they're overpowering or outsmarting God, but it's simply because God has allowed it to be for now. God has a plan that He is bringing to fruition, and the nation of Babylon was just one piece of that plan. As Yahweh said through Jeremiah 27, verse 6, "Now I have given all these lands into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, my servant, and I have given him also the beasts of the field to serve him." God placed the world into Babylon's hands, but only for a short time. Just as God gave them their glory, so He also took it away. Jeremiah 50, verse 24, "I set a snare for you, and you were taken, O Babylon, and you did not know it. You were found and caught, because you opposed Yahweh." Babylon today is nothing more than ancient history. For all their pride and glory, they ultimately perished. So today, we should not be fooled when we see wicked men and wicked nations prospering. They aren't triumphing over God when they achieve success while defying God's will. No matter how powerful and wealthy they appear to be, in reality, they have nothing. God can take their wealth and success away anytime He wants, just like He did when He confused the Babylonians' language, or when He reduced King Nebuchadnezzar to madness, or when He wiped the entire nation of Babylon out of existence. Today, we would do well to learn from Babylon's mistakes. Rather than exalt ourselves in our pride, we should instead humble ourselves and ascribe to God the power and authority that He alone possesses. We pray you've been blessed by this teaching, and remember, continue to test everything. Shalom.
YHWH Ministries has produced hundreds of biblical teachings, and now you can own all of them on one physical device. We're excited to announce that our entire video library in HD quality is now available on a flash drive. This drive can be plugged into your PC, phone, tablet, or anything else with a USB or USB-C port. The drive also contains written transcripts of our teachings for those who prefer to read rather than watch. Of course, we still offer all of our material for free at testeverything.net, but having a physical copy will allow you to watch our videos anywhere and anytime without the need for an internet connection. Having a physical copy will also ensure that our teachings are available if we are ever removed from video websites, which is a danger that ministries around the world are facing more and more. We want to continue to reach as many people as possible. Now, you might be asking, but what about all the new teachings released every week? Well, in addition to receiving all our past teachings, your purchase comes with free updates for life. Each flash drive comes with instructions that will allow you to easily download and store new teachings as they are released. Or mail us in the flash drive once a year, and we will update it for you and send it back at no charge to you. We hope you are blessed by this new resource. And as always, any proceeds our ministry receives goes right back into producing more teachings. Get your YHWH flash drive today by going to YHWHflashdrive.com.
It is because of you, our generous supporters, who make it possible to offer these high-quality teachings completely free of charge. If you feel led to support YHWH Ministries so that we can continue this effort, please visit testeverything.net and click on the Support YHWH tab. Learn how you can partner with us to take the whole Word of God to the nations.